All right, quick pause before today's episode. No, let's talk about data accuracy because I watch too many brands make huge mistakes based on broken attribution. If your Google Analytics revenue doesn't match your Shopify dashboard, which I know happens for most, or Meta claims credit for sales that actually came from email, you're making very expensive guesses about what's actually working. And from my years at Shopify working with many brands, I can tell you this, the problem is costing you real money every single day. Now, Little Data fixes this, and they're trusted by over 2,000 Shopify brands for conversion tracking that actually works. They create one reliable foundation across everything that you're already using. Think about Google Analytics for, revenue tracking, Meta, Google, TikTok, for better ad attribution. Think about Klaviyo, Attentive, like for your flows, and even Recharge, for example, if you're running a subscription business. And so the best part is that you set it up once and it just works. Like there's no maintenance, there's no technical headaches. It just scales as you grow your business. So if you're kind of tired of making decisions based on data that you don't completely trust, totally head over to littledata.io. They and their solution will help you fix your attribution foundation so that you have accurate data. So littledata.io. All right, let's go jump into today's episode.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about something that I believe is kind of quietly kind of reshaping the whole customer journey right now. And, I'd argue that most operators are completely missing it. And I know that because I get DM'd about, hey, how come I'm not showing up in ChatGPT or whatever? And I think what's interesting, because a lot of people are asking these sort of questions either to Google directly or ChatGPT or Perplexity, Gemini, whatever you're using, I don't know, for example, let's say best moisturizer for dry skin, or, what's the best Shopify app, I don't know, to handle subscriptions or something. And then, the AI is now generating one answer. Sometimes there's some citations onto the right, but, and a lot of times a brand really isn't being mentioned in that answer. And if that's the case, then you're clearly not being very visible, and there really is no second page, and there's really no way to go back in. It just is what it is, right? And I think this whole concept is called this answer engine optimization. I think the short form is AEO. And I believe that what it's doing is it's bridging between, I guess, kind of traditional SEO, like the search engine optimization, and now this kind of AI-driven future that we're kind of in right now. And you're either getting cited and trusted by these sources, or you literally don't exist. The customer journey, which is terrible, right? And that's why my guest is on today. He's been on before, but Matt's fantastic. Matt Stafford, he's the managing director of a company called Build, Grow, Scale, and they're at buildgrowscale.com. Now, Matt's really been helping hundreds of D2C brands, tons of Shopify brands, really to scale past the 7 and in some cases even 8 figures. He has a very interesting philosophy, which we're going to dig into in this show, but his philosophy is that traffic isn't your problem. Optimization is your problem. And he's combining a lot of data-driven kind of conversational work with founders and the psychology around the founder and just how to figure out and future-proof your brand, both for human buyers, which I think is really important, but then we have to, in this day and age, we have to also make sure that the machine understands your brand, and that's where the AEO fits in. So, hi, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. And just to add to what you were saying, what we're also noticing is that those recommendations are very personal to the people because the language model that they use on a regular basis has memory now. So it actually is tailoring the suggestions to them based off of their own personal circumstance, which now when we are looking at the data and actually even talking to the consumers that have purchased through the large language models, they view them more like a trusted advisor And so the conversions from the language models, all the data is showing that it's about 5 times more valuable or 5 times more likely to convert than a Google click. And we know, I think you alluded to it a little bit there in the intro, that the Google clicks are going down. We're seeing about 30% of our organic traffic disappearing over the last 12 to 18 months. And we know that about 56% of Google clicks result, or 56% of Google searches result in 0 click. So this isn't something that you can avoid for very much longer. It's already happening, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, but the sky is not falling. So I believe that there are a lot of processes and tools for those that are interested. I think that's why we're here today, is just to learn more about like, well, what is available and what can I do as a solo operator, or if you're firmly entrenched in the mid market, that there's lots of opportunity out there. I think we should probably maybe talk a little bit about, like the whole revenue leak kind of situation, because I really feel if we get a little bit of a foundation first about your whole methodology, I think that'll set the stage as to why AI optimization is an important kind of strategy. So let's talk a little bit about, like, you're clearly seeing a lot of revenue leaks, but I think you coin it more like revenue optimization. Can you talk a little about like what does that mean in practice, kind of before we jump into the AI?
Yes, so many people tend to, you can tell what their level of skill that they're playing at by how they label things. So we call it revenue optimization because personally, I don't care if your store does $1 million and it costs you $990,000 in order to do that $1 million of revenue, or if your store does $1 million and it only costs you $250,000 to do that revenue. I would take the second store that's doing the same amount of revenue, but a lot more profitable. So we're not consumed with the vanity metrics of just conversion rate or just revenue. We want to know how much we take home, because as a business owner, we're not doing this as a charity. It's like to make money, and profit is not a dirty word.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, and I've also learned through you, I think in a previous episode, about the fact that like traffic typically is not a brand's problem. A lot of founders still to this day believe that they just need more eyeballs. So how do you kind of reframe that kind of mindset a bit to focus more on the right levers, not just traffic?
Yeah, this comes from running our own brand, and through the data over the last 10, 11 years that we've done, we had probably over $1 billion go through carts that we've optimized. We're looking at all different areas. The average e-commerce site converts around 2 to 3%. So the way that I started looking at that when I was buying traffic for my store, I was like, okay, I'm getting 100 visitors from Facebook, and now I'm converting how much that costs me to it's X amount per click, and trying to do the metrics. But then I was wondering why we weren't making money. And then we started looking into the analytics and saw, oh, wow, our load time is too long. So we have a 60% bounce rate. So essentially, for every 100 visitors that I'm getting, 60 of them are leaving. So I'm really spending the ad spend to get 100, but I'm actually only getting 40 people to my site. And so then that's the accurate number that you need to use in order to make your projections. Or you need to fix the site so that the bounce rate goes down. And now, a 10% reduction in your bounce rate can give you 20% more visitors. And that changes your metrics very fast. But to go back to the original, is that 2 to 3% convert. So that means for every 100 visitors that you sent, or that raised their hand and came to your site, only 2 or 3 bought. And like you said, most owners think, wow, I need more visitors. To me, I use Dan Kennedy's statement of he who can afford to buy or spend the most to acquire the customer wins. So I'm like, okay, how can we afford to acquire more? Well, if I can convert 2 or 3 more of those 97 people that left, now I have 6 sales for every 100 visits. my competitors have 2 or 3 sales for every visit, I can now spend more money to acquire customers, and I can buy market share and dominate my market.
Yeah, 100%. I'm all in on that. And I learned a little bit even yesterday. I had another fellow on and we were talking about the funnel itself. And I think these whole conversion rate, just as a number, pretty much is just a vanity metric overall. And he talks about the fact about breaking it down, like, what is your product page to add to cart rate? And then what's your cart completion rate? And then, and so he went through these 4 different steps. And it's so interesting, right? Because that's more metric driven, because because if people are going to the product page and they're adding to cart and not buying, then that's a different signal problem than it is if they're not even coming to the site, or they're just looking around and never add it to cart.
100%. That's how we reverse engineer what area to work on first. You have the add to cart, the proceed to checkout, and then the completion of the sale.
Right. And there's strategy around all of that. This is a whole nother episode, but I'll put it in the show notes. I'll link to that because it's very interesting having the funnel organized in that fashion and thinking about the metrics in each one of those kind of stages of a successful transaction.
100%. Yeah, we have just what we would consider best practices, based off of your average order value, what your add to cart should be, and then what the drop off is from each step. Because no matter what you do, there's going to be some drop off. And then how you mitigate that is you improve it. And then at the end, you get better at recalling, your abandoned carts, abandoned checkouts through email or SMS, or just actually content marketing rather than just buy my stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to pivot over to Shopify for just a quick moment, because I want to call out every 6 months they release what they call editions. This was the winter editions, 2026 came out. And the reason I'm calling this out right now is because they have clearly put their flag in the AI sand. Partly you can tell by the number of employees have been let go over the last 18 months just because of AI and some consolidation. And they're definitely an AI first company now. They've been very clear about that. But what they've kind of enhanced, which I think you know a lot about, I think internally you guys have been talking about Sidekick as this new AI kind of coworker thing that's going on, and even some internal testing and things. What's your initial, I know it's in the early days, it just came out a couple of days ago, but what's your initial thought about Sidekick as this AI companion or coworker?
Yeah, so we have our own team of developers, and what we've noticed is our project managers are able to use these tools that are in the Shopify tool belt now and get a lot of work done that we don't even need to send to the developer. So our development team we've been able to scale it down a little bit, or have them focus on the harder problems only. And a lot of these simple things, the store owner now can take care of a lot of it. And so what I would say is the speed to implementation for a small team can match that of a very large team. We have almost 30 employees. So someone using these AI tools can really run side by side with a bigger team and do it for a lot less money, which is pretty incredible and actually very exciting, because I think that there's not a lot of times that happens where the little guy can compete with these big leverage things. And it's also happening even in the way that the language models are affecting search. So there's 2 or 3 levers that have come out in the last 12 months that are making this, they're leveling the playing field again for the small mom and pop guys, or, the smaller stores, to actually compete and do well.
Yeah, it's amazing. They even have this thing, I think it's called SimGym, where they're allowing for testing and stuff kind of before you deploy. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's a simulated A/B test to be able to release something that has a much better chance of winning, which in any playbook, I would always love to have the most successful plays before I play them.
Yeah. So Okay, so this is basically what's going on kind of like inside Shopify with the business, but I think we should probably now talk a little bit about what happens outside of the platform. I think that's kind of the core of our conversation today, like about this whole kind of answer engine optimization, like as a strategy. So like, why do you believe like that even matters right now? Shopify has these AI features, fair enough, but having, this answer engine optimization strategy now, why do we need it? And then what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so I would say the hardest part of owning an e-commerce company is how expensive ads have gotten in order to drive traffic to your site. So that's the hardest hurdle for the business owner to overcome. And now you have an ability to see, well, let me step back a second so we give some context around the content. Essentially, back in 2004, when SEO really started becoming a thing, it created this upward spiral of if you ranked well, you would get a bunch of organic traffic, which would convert, which would give you more sales, which would give you a higher ranking, which would make more sales. And the people that dominated the SEO won on traffic. Well, now the new search that was never planned for with SEO that's happening in the AEO is essentially leveling the playing field again. Everybody is starting from zero, and it's harder to game it because you can type in a million different queries because it's a lot more personal than it is like when you just go type a keyword phrase into Google search. And we also know that now about 56% of Google searches result in zero click, which means the experience that Google is serving through SEO is no longer working the way that it did. So all of that traffic doesn't disappear, it just goes somewhere else. And the advantage to that is the old SEO, the legacy companies that dominated that you couldn't compete with because they have years and years of content out there. You can now go get that AEO traffic just as easy as they can. And that traffic is proving to convert much higher than a Google click. So you would need about 5 Google clicks for every one that's sent from an LLM to convert the same amount. And when you reverse engineer that math, when almost 60% of them result in zero click, now you need 10 Google clicks to equal the same amount as one AEO click.
Right. So I guess the next question then I totally agree with you, but the next question is around like, are there any signals or any kind of structures that can be implemented for a brand? So almost like, so you're helping these AI engines understand like who you are or what you sell or what you stand for. I guess it's so hard. I don't know. I personally don't have the answer to it. And that's why that's why I have you on today.
Yeah, I'm part of a community that is literally, they have 5 full-time people and the community is free to join. I'll give you the link for the show notes, where they are studying what's working and figuring that out in real time and sharing that with people so that they can, jump on this trend now while it's early. I truly believe, just because of the scale and how fast it's being adopted, that it's probably the biggest swing that I've seen in e-commerce in the last 11 years doing this full time and, selling millions of dollars worth of consulting per year. I literally believe that this is the biggest swing in e-commerce that I've seen since I've started.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because like I said, and then even in the early days when I was at Shopify, one of the things I always used to talk about was, getting a blog going and thinking about, SEO as the best ROI possible, because you put in the early work, but then you just kind of like own the top spot and you get all this free traffic and your acquisition costs are next to zero. And a lot of that has completely changed now. You mentioned already about the traffic going down on a lot of brands, people having to diversify into different channels to kind of make up for the difference. But part of it is, well, let's play the game along with where these tools actually are, if it's AI overviews or ChatGPT or whatever, right? So,
yeah, I believe in the next 3-4 years, most websites will probably not even be visited. They'll probably look more like a Notion doc that these large language models can read in markup language, and then they'll make the recommendation inside the large language model. People will buy and check out right there and never even visit your website.
Yeah. That's insane, right? And all of these connections now that Shopify is making with ChatGPT, with Etsy, with a lot of other players now, where you can like physically buy from within the app. And you're right, you don't even have to go to the Shopify store. You can buy within ChatGPT, and you can check out with Shop Pay, and boom, you're done.
100%. And I think that that's going to get more and more and more prolific. It's going to change the face of e-commerce over the next 24 to 36 months.
Wow, it's crazy. I've also been looking at different tools and stuff out there, and and we're not here to pitch any one tool over another, because it's clearly you can do your own research. But I've been looking at some enterprise tools like Profound, looking at AirOps, even Searchable.com. A lot of these are like, I guess part of it is they're tracking kind of brand visibility and like citations across these search engines. I mean, I even have like Hrefs and stuff like that, and I'm seeing I'm being cited, and so are some of the e-commerce brands that I'm part of right now. But like. Is there any kind of like an insider tips you can get about, I know you're saying you're in this group and stuff, but is there anything that a brand can do today to more than likely have that trust and authority and expertise that these models are wanting to cite these businesses in these answers?
Yeah, there is. And I mean, it could be a 4-hour podcast.
No doubt.
And to be really honest, I would say that I tend to default to saying that I'm not the expert in it, because anybody that claims that they are is lying, or they're trying to sell you something, because it's changing. So what was working 6 months ago doesn't work now. Something new is working, because these language models are updating things so fast, and what they're considering to be a better signal, they're learning and growing just like Google did over years. And so I think that it's going to take another 6 to 12 months for it to really settle in, and then kind of plant their flag in what they're using in order to make these recommendations. And I think the good thing about that right now is, if you're willing to invest a little bit and work on it now, by the time that the flag is planted, you're going to be way farther ahead of everyone else that's just saying, well, I'll wait until we figure it out because I don't want to waste any money. And then they're going to automatically be behind by that 6 to 12 months.
I've also learned too a little bit along the way about schema. On kind of key pages, you think about like product schema and fact schema, like FAQs and stuff like that. I think that's interesting, because I think if the data is built into the post or the product page, then AI engines can actually parse that data correctly and structure it correctly so it's machine readable. And I think that really helps.
It does a lot. Schema does matter. Yeah, and actually, buyer intent FAQs, we're seeing that has a lot to do with it. When the FAQs are laid out in the way that it actually answers specific types of questions, rather than like, when are you shipping my stuff? Like, that's really not buyer intent. And a lot of times people are using that FAQ to be a sales page, when instead of actually answering technical questions. So the FAQs that answer the technical questions is actually what the LLMs are weighting in order to give, what they're putting more weight towards in order to give a response.
The other thing I've learned too, and I know we're doing some kind of show and tell here, I also learned a bit about creating comparison content, like your brand versus a competitor. I think the AI engines really are pulling from a lot of this comparison content right now. So, hey, what's the difference between X and Y? Even though it some brands, it feels a little uncomfortable to want to do that. But I think if you own the comparison content, means you kind of control the narrative a bit.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, your buyers do comparisons. And so I think the people that are the most transparent and share that information provide the most trust. If you're openly sharing who else you're competing with, the person is going to naturally think like, well, they're not trying to hide anything.
I see. And what about, like, I noticed in Google too, that sometimes on the right sidebar when you type something, there is the AI overviews, but there's also sometimes, not always, but it comes up, people also asked. And I find it interesting that that box is there and around similar core topics. Is that another way of potentially optimizing a brand, saying, well, people, maybe things you never even thought of, and should you learn from what's in that people also ask section to figure out content or product pages that need to be updated?
I think that's a great point. Honestly, I hadn't thought about it. And so you saying that, you seeded my brain to go look into that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's talk a bit about your company, because I really want to understand. Like, I've looked, and once again, we're not here to pitch your company, but I really feel that you're firmly entrenched in the mid market. I think $5 to $20 million brands. So not for everybody, but you really, I think, are all about incrementality. You really are there to help people, and especially when it comes to these AI engines now. Talk a little bit about like how you're a different kind of agency and why you're more focused on the profit side, and kind of like how overall you're able to help, because you have a whole list of like incredible brands that you work with currently. So
Yeah, it's just what we care about is the data and analytics. We don't go by our gut feel. We certainly have, best practices that we know over years of doing this, how people interact with your website. But sites are very contextual, and they're getting more and more contextual. So not everybody wants the same experience. And so when your site is built off of the data and analytics and we adjust it according to that, we get more people to add to cart. And when the cart is laid out in a way that we know, a lot of people think like, oh, well, I want a bunch of upsells in my cart. Well, we know that when you put a bunch of upsells in there, based off of which ones you put in there, many times it actually hurts your conversions, because now the person's like, oh, do I need that too? And then they go look and they search, and you've taken them out of the buying cycle and put them back into the browsing cycle. So there's certainly good things to do and poor things to do that are going to affect how many people that become customers that then you can market to. Our goal is to get more customers, and then you do a good job of marketing to them and you sell a good product so that they'll come back and use you again and again. It's not the latest trick or hack that will get somebody to buy from you and then you send them something junky and then they'll never come back.
right. Yeah, it's crazy. What about fresh content? Because I feel that, I'm not sure if this is actually true or not, but it seems that cited content in a lot of these AI engines right now, it seems that it gives more value towards like more fresher, newer content. And so I wonder how a Shopify brand should be thinking about like the freshness factor when it comes to that.
I agree. And the way that we're accomplishing that is through what we would call progressive disclosure, meaning you could put a tab or you could put a section that would have like a see more button. And there's a whole bunch of content in there that the language models or Google can crawl, and that information gets updated based off of what's going on now. And it doesn't hurt the user experience. The only people that will see it are the ones that want to see it. And other than that, you're just feeding the algorithm in order to share your site as the recommended way for them to solve their problem.
I see. So what do you say to listeners that, and clearly there's a lot of people that are wearing a lot of hats in their business. They're, paid media, they're doing email, they're probably dabbling in some CRO, things like that, and now we have to add on this kind of like AEO opportunity now on top of everything else. How do you recommend prioritizing so that, that it's like what they're actually working on is compounding, maybe instead of like chasing a shiny object, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that you need to schedule thinking time, not just busy work. Most of us default to certainty over opportunity because we know that, if I answer these emails and I spend this much on traffic, I'm going to make this amount of sales. And what happens is over time, it starts not working as well and it gets harder and harder. So you need to take some time and figure out what's sustainable and what are the metrics that this month I'm going to spend my time in this area of my business, and next month I will spend my focus time in this area of the business. So 3-4 months down the road, your entire business has got an overhaul of what's effective. And then you just kind of keep doing that circle every 3 to 4 months, and your business stays relevant rather than essentially dying on the vine.
Yeah. So what about a brand story? I just always feel warm and fuzzy when I hear about, because you clearly do have done for you services where you're helping a business in this regard. Like, is there any, I don't know if you have to call it the brand publicly or not, but, maybe anecdotally, but, maybe a brand was, achieving a certain, level of success, and then they came on board with Build, Grow, Scale. You executed some of your processes, and then what does great look like for them after the engagement with you?
Yeah, that certainly varies based on the maturity level of the different businesses. We've had businesses that have 4 or 5x'd in a year. We have ones that have doubled. We have ones that have grown 30%. It's really a lot of times you can create enough sales that you can break your supply chains. There's just a whole lot of things that matter. We love the brands that have a great product. They understand how to buy traffic, because once you have those two things, all the things that we work on, I always say small hinges swing big doors. So you're not necessarily looking for these big things. It's actually many times it's removing a lot of the stuff that you have on your site that doesn't get any attention, or they're not clicking on it, they're not using it, so that your message becomes a lot more clear. I think that clarity always will trump persuasion. A lot of times people are trying to do too much, and it confuses the buyer. So the buyer has this paradox of choice and ends up not buying or coming back at another time, or they leave for now, and then the AEO search engine recommends a brand that wasn't yours. So you paid to get them to come to your brand, educated them, they left, and then bought the other competitor. So it really, I think less is more. And you're going to find that 80-20 rule is very applicable. About 20% of your products are going to do about 80% of your sales. And it's such a hard concept for the owner to buy into, that they want to eliminate a whole bunch of things that have made a few sales. They think that matters, when success leaves clues, and the easier you make it to buy the things that you sell the most, your conversions always go up.
Interesting. I'd love to dabble into the conversion question again, because it's been coming up a lot. Brands have been mentioning to me about this, and I'm sure you'll have an opinion on this, because I know I do. But in America, when someone visits a website and you said, maybe let's call it an average conversion rate of 2%, maybe in a high end 3%, depending on the product, but let's just call it like 2% for the sake of argument. But so knowing that 98 of 100 are leaving, many have not opted in or don't even know that there's an offer or a deal or a newsletter or a VIP promotional loyalty thing. They don't even know about it, and off they go. And as we know, there are tools out there like retention.com and OpenSend and a few others that are kind of like unhashing the unknown site visitor into an email address, and there's a full address. They've probably previously opted in for marketing materials somewhere else on the web, and because of that, this data now becomes publicly available. And my last little comment is that I think in America, we're more of an opt-out legislation for email, meaning you literally can send an email to anybody at any time as long as you have a legal opt-out. And so knowing that, maybe that's some of the reasons why some of these tools are doing so well in D2C, is that you show up to the website, you didn't sign up for anything, and then you get a welcome sequence or thanks for visiting sequence. I just want to hear your mindset around, do you know anybody currently doing that? Is that something that you recommend, or are there risk factors that go along with sending an email to someone who didn't kind of quote unquote legally opt in?
Yeah, so we definitely do that. I encourage every single one of the brands that we work with to do it. We have tested every tool out there, and they are not all equal. We have ones that ruin your sending score, and we have ones that the people opt in when they land on the site, and those ones tend to not create that negative effect on your email send. Your email and SMS are going to be your largest generated revenue. So anything that you do that hurts that is going to have a downstream effect that's going to cause the business to suffer in one form or another. So I would say, yes, we absolutely do it. And yes, we have figured out ways to do it that don't hurt the brand, that actually help. We have one brand that gets about 20,000 people added to their list every single month, and they have less than a 1% unsubscribe from those people, because essentially what happens is out of their 100,000 visitors, they'll get about 60,000 that will click the accept cookies. And then from there, we resolve about 20%, 20 to 30%. So you're still only getting about 20,000 people. But, those people are essentially what I would consider at that point warm traffic, and they stay in the sequences and they're buying.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So I was just curious on that, because I've had a few of them on. I've had the retention people on, and Open Send has been on before. And I think Wonderkind wants to get on. There's a few others out there that are, I think there's some even e-commerce focused competitors out there too, that, that I think get involved with cart abandonment and all that. And then, I think those are the ones they kind of unhash. Because you got it to cart and you're abandoning. So instead of like leaving or, retargeting, but actually knowing what was in cart is a really amazing intel to have.
Yeah, and it converts high and it generates a lot of revenue. So it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. So what do you think our next steps are? I mean, there's people that are listening today that it's just like, hey, this is all great information. Like if someone's in their early stages right now, is there any kind of like one or two things you say, hey, if you're in your early days trying to get traction and product market fit, but you don't want to be behind the 8 ball of this, AI thing that's happening right now, what do you say to those people?
I would say the number one thing that you need to do is understand your Google Analytics and how to have your site tagged in a way that you can look at the data, because the people who are using the data are winning and it's predictable.
Yeah. Okay, I agree. And then how about people in the mid-market to enterprise side that are looking for that incrementality or trying to create that almost competitive moat, so to speak, from an AI perspective?
Yeah, again, I would say the brands that we work with are the ones that are the most successful because they don't try to be all things to everybody and they don't try to do it all themselves. They find high quality partners because the face of business is changing so fast. In order to keep up with all of it, you could spend all your time learning and no time doing. So I really think that e-commerce is evolving to the point where it requires a team of 3 or 4 different specialists that each operate in their own zone of genius that create these brands that are working, much more than having a big, large team that you're responsible for when it goes up and down.
Yeah, I totally get it. So how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you or learn more about Build, Grow, Scale?
Yeah, just buildgrowscale.com is the website, and go there. And if you like what you heard or you want us to take a look at your site and maybe give you some suggestions, you could book a call with me. And that's very easy to do right on the site. And I'll jump on and see if we can provide some value. And if not, we can certainly send you in a direction with someone that could.
Yeah, it's amazing. So almost like a little roadmap, so to speak, or some next steps people could figure out what might be working or not working. Almost like a business partner, a little freebie just to kind of get some clarity, I guess, around their site. So yeah, I'll make sure that goes in the show notes. That's a really good call out then. But all right, Matt. Well, once again, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing all this. I think this sounds like this needs to be a recurring recording, because you're obviously in that group right now and really on the front lines of what's working to become discoverable in AI tools and stuff. And I think knowing that, it sounds like we need to be on a call every 6 months to what's new now?
Yeah, let's do it. I love it. And you always have an amazing podcast, and I appreciate listening to it even when I'm not the guest.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much for that. All right. Have yourself a great afternoon.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Take care. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.